So if we have visceral fat, that is the body telling us that I am putting fat where it doesn't belong. That's a dysfunction we have to unpack regardless. And certainly with any excess fat, we know that fat isn't just a cell that is sitting there hanging out. It's metabolically active, it's trapping toxins. So we need to understand its impact.
So we have Ashley Koff on the podcast today, RD. She is known for her qualitarian approach to nutrition, which emphasizes the quality, sourcing, and personalization of food and supplements. Her work focuses on helping people improve metabolic health, energy, body composition, and long-term health outcomes. How much of pesticides can you get off if it's not organic?
When you actually prepare things in a little bit of water and then you get rid of the water and make sure that you're washing your fruits and vegetables, that part can be great. I think some of the cooking preparations can also help you, with a reduction there. Appetite and hunger change so dramatically after surgery with something called incretin hormones. In optimizing that with things like the polyphenols, the fibers, since I've seen patients using those medications, what I realized is if anyone has any benefit from those medications, they've proven underneath their own hormones weren't functioning properly. I'm like, okay, how do we make this work? How do we look at this? And what I realized was,
all right. Well, I am so excited to have my friend, Ashley. How long have we known each other?
you know what? I don't know. Maybe 10 years, I think, is a fair way to say.
Yeah,
Like
a long
time. Yes, exactly. It has been awesome to watch you just like fulfill your life purpose and do all of this. It's amazing.
Thank you. I mean, same. Yeah, I remember. Obviously, our whole friendship, we've been talking about health. So
Yeah.
I love that. So we have Ashley Koff on the podcast today, RD. She is known for her qualitarian approach to nutrition, which emphasizes the quality, sourcing, and personalization of food and supplements. Her work focuses on helping people improve metabolic health, energy, body composition, and long-term health outcomes through practical evidence-based frameworks. And you've just published your third book, so I can't wait to talk about it today.
Thank you. This one's really unique because it's I'm very vulnerable. I share my personal story, and I think that this is is really me fulfilling my life purpose, as we dive into the topic of weight health.
I love that. Well, let's start with, what is your personal story?
Yeah, I'll leave everyone for the hopefully funny and emotional moments in the book, but I think one of the key really drivers for me was that I was such an empowered, fun, cute, curly-haired, chubby little girl until about age 8. I like to say I was a cross between Shirley Temple and Spanky from The Little Rascals, and these may precede you, in terms of who they were. But around age 8, there was a bully at school, and I think I was maybe starting to be conscious that I had a belly, maybe in my swimsuit or that kind of thing. But the bully was making fun of me and actually took me out back with another kid that he was bullying and ended up like punching me several times in my stomach. Yeah. And, and it was interesting because I really didn't unpack this part of it until more recently when my niece was turning 8. And it really hit me that was a moment where I saw my belly as this weakness. And I was like, wait, I'm this strong. Like, I was raised by parents that were like, regardless of your gender, like you can be anything. My grandmother's like, get out there and go. And suddenly I had a weakness that really made me feel like I had something that I just did not want to have. I didn't want society to see me as weak at all. So it set me on a path to get rid of my belly. And like so many Americans today, and especially in the 70s and 80s, it's diets. It was diet and exercise. I was never told that I had a health problem except for the fact that I was on antibiotics at least once a month. So I was having ear infections and throat infections. Later, I had difficult periods, so I was on birth control. Later on from that, I had some skin issues, so I was on skin medications. But I was always told by society that I was healthy. So for me, this, what really arose in those 20 years was actually the pursuit of weight and weight loss really contributed to me making some of the most unhealthy choices in my life. And it wasn't until, and this is where the part gets funny, it sounds like a joke, but I was in a bar. I had not been drinking for like 3 or 4 years. I was a macrobiotic vegan who did yoga at age 20 in Manhattan. But I had done a goat's milk only cleanse because some healer had pricked my finger and told me I had a worm. And I was like, well, maybe it's the worm that's my belly issue. Anyway, when that cleanse didn't work, as most don't, I found myself in a bar drinking a lot, telling the story. Everyone was laughing. And a guy comes up to me and he says, did you ever take antibiotics as a kid? And I looked at him drunk, like, off tequila. And I was like, yeah, I basically freebase them, like kind of. And I said, I was like, that's the weirdest pickup line, ever. And he turned around and he gave me his card and he said, look, insurance will pay for it. I'm a gastroenterologist. I practice a little bit differently. And he was my first exposure to somebody who was a root cause practitioner. So today we might call them functional. We might say integrative medicine, lifestyle medicine. But when I went to see him, he literally never asked about my weight. He asked about, was I on antibiotics? He asked things like, was I happy or sad? Like, he asked me about time in nature. It was like early days of longevity, right?
Yeah.
And then he said to me, it doesn't matter what you're eating or not eating. Your body doesn't have what it needs to run better. And that sent me to a bookstore, probably, it's like all of our origin stories of just wanting to discover. I was so curious to understand how my body actually works. And that's how I became a dietitian. And from that moment forward, I knew not just to heal myself, but to heal others, that I really needed to take more of what I call a weight health approach, where your weight composition is a key performance indicator for your health, but it isn't separated from your health. It's very much telling us a story.
Yeah. Wow. Well,
Yeah.
this is new for me learning.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
that I learned this about you today. I mean, we're living in a time where it's wild on the internet. From nutrition, we're definitely going to unpack like what does healthy nutrition look like.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm sure it's bio-individual, but also like you've obviously been practicing in this field for so long. What is going on? Because we know the rates of chronic disease and obesity, they're just through the roof. So, obviously there might be nuance like you had, but what is the big picture here? What do you think is going on?
Yeah, I think there's probably two things. The first is we are increasingly, and you're so like spot on about this, we're increasingly just exposing ourselves to more challenges to the system. So if the body's an operating system, then the more challenges that you put in front of it, the harder it is for it to operate in an optimal way. And part of I think a key piece of that is, yes, there are toxins, and yes, there's all sorts of things, that we shouldn't be consuming from a food standpoint. But it's also just the sheer quantity of information about what we should be doing. So one of the things that I think is a huge factor in longevity today is actually just infobesity. When it comes to nutrition and health, this concept that we can actually acquire enough nutrition knowledge for us to become healthy. And so people are just out there knowledge, trying to acquire more and more, when actually the work that you do is so important. It's really about the insights that you have about your body, or like we were just talking about your bedroom. It's like, I'm like, well, do you think that this works? You're like, I can tell you that it works because I track this, et cetera. So instead of just believing what somebody else says about something, it's actually, going into your body. And I do the same thing for people's bodies. So I'll say, like, instead of wondering what your body needs, how many ounces of water you need to be hydrated, I have a simple test, called being a hose or a sponge. You drink water and you see how long it is until you have to pee. That's going to give me good insights about, are you absorbing, et cetera. So I would say that the amount of information and just sort of the excess of toxins that are challenging the operating system is huge. The second part, which will bring us into the nutrition piece, is we have to optimally resource the body. What we've set up from a nutrition standpoint for decades now are, especially in the like 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, really dumb amounts when we had the RDAs. Like people would call these the recommended daily allowances. And I was like, they are so suboptimal for an individual. So what we need to look at is, what does your body need from an optimal level, which is extremely bio-individual, and also for an individual changes, throughout the month, throughout the week. So we really need to look at personalizing our nutrition as an optimization process rather than a sufficiency process.
Yeah, I agree. What are some of the, like, would you want to call it a few things that are the RDAs that you just don't agree with off the bat?
Yeah, let's pick one. So I think you'll love this. The dietary recommended intake, which is the new name for the RDAs, for magnesium, is still from 1997. 1997. Okay. The second part is it's for a 135-pound woman and a 166-pound man. And based on gender and total weight, it sets up that men need 20% more magnesium than women. So when we understand that magnesium is responsible for turning off stress responses, for optimizing, there are 400 different reasons, different reactions that we know of, right? So I think if you've had like one uterine contraction ever, or if you just are a woman who's trying to deal with the stress of the environment, I'm not looking for women to need more than men in anything, but can we at least be at parity, right?
Yeah.
And so 400 milligrams is so suboptimal. I have patients that, sometimes in the month, sometimes in the moment, depending on their workout and other things, it's 800, it's 1,000, it's a gram of magnesium. Now, the other part of that is it's from food and supplements. So one of the other issues, there's so much infighting in nutrition. So I was on a panel recently at the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. I'm not a member, but I was invited to speak, and we had a pretty aggressive conversation on the panel because my panel participants were against supplementation, and they felt that I'm more of like a shill, or I think they actually used that word, or they said something, about like supplementation. And, they're like, we are just trying to help people, get what they need from food, like at dinner, chicken and rice. And I was like, so if you're having chicken and rice, you're getting no magnesium, especially in today's, environment. So the potential for supplements to help us optimize our total nutrition is really valid as long as they're quality, from that standpoint, and they're individualized. So I'd say the magnesium one is really bad. The protein one is pretty bad. The water one, I can keep going on.
Yeah.
Probably the one that I am the most frustrated about historically and ongoing is this conversation about dairy being a food group, and then the other side of it being that we have a recommended amount of added sugar. Like, it's saying like, oh, don't have more than X amount of, whether it's 6, 8, 10 teaspoons in a day of added sugar. And I just don't think that at all aligns with where we need to be from health practices.
What is your opinion on sugar? How much do you think?
Yeah, it's going to be super personal for sure. I think that natural sources of sugar, including natural added sugars, are so much better for the body than things that are manipulated into isolates, or, certainly than anything that's artificial. I think the part of it is we need to understand for somebody what sugar is doing in their body. So when we have elevated blood sugar, we actually are dehydrating. The body senses that and says, I don't want my blood to get sticky, which is what happens when the sugar's in there. So it pulls water from our cells. So it dehydrates us. So if I'm trying to optimize somebody's hydration and their metabolism, the added sugar, if it's elevating their blood sugar, is going to be an issue. Well, added sugar is much more likely to elevate your blood sugar than the sugar found in foods. But there's probably a dance for people where, depending on your level of activity, depending on your health status, like maybe a teaspoon here, I have some people that love Manuka honey as an example, and maybe they'll put that in some tea, or they might have it to make something a little bit sweet. Great, on that part. But I think once you get up into the multiple teaspoons, we really, from an added sugar standpoint, we run into a problem. And then looking at your carbohydrate sources of sugar, you really need to understand how the body is using those for energy.
Yeah, great point. I will, depending on, a lot of times I am kind of manipulating my nutrition around how intense my exercise is.
Absolutely, yeah.
So if I'm really doing intense exercise, I will increase my protein a little bit, and I sometimes will increase my carbohydrates. But I also use micronutrient testing so that I'm not really guessing.
Right.
How
Yeah.
do you feel about that?
I love that. And I think I love your concept of manipulating. You're the ultimate, I think like some people don't love the word biohacker. So I just kind of like lean into like longevity, but like, bioassessment, or, really assessing ourselves. I think that makes a big difference. It's interesting. Activity, I would say, is one way that we can look at our overall nutrient intake. Absolutely. But, when we're burning through stress, or if we're healing from something, we may be in this interesting space where we need more nutrition. But if it's actually negatively impacted our activity, we have to be careful about how we deliver it.
Yeah.
And the second part is also from a hormonal standpoint for women. I've found, as an example, with doing more, I've started doing endurance training as a 50-something-year-old.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, totally. I think like early on in my life, I did a couple of things, but and then my hormones, and especially as some of my hormones are just departing, I've actually needed to lean into a different amount of nutrition and kind of match it. So I think there are other things than just our activity to adjust our nutrition to. Micronutrient testing is really interesting. I would say pros and considerations for everything. I don't like to say cons. I reserve those for when people are just selling you things and they're not personalized. But The considerations with micronutrient testing is that it is not going to necessarily tell us how our body, where in the body everything is allocated, right? So we need certain things in the bone. So if we're testing our blood, we may need certain amounts in our blood, but it's not going to necessarily tell us where everything else is. So I think using it along with other assessment can be helpful. And then the second part is micronutrient testing is going to not be a good indicator if our digestion isn't optimized. So I think one of the things that happens with nutrition today is we give a lot of credit for foods being healthy as like their food. So somebody would say to me, well, Ashley, isn't wild salmon healthy? We can unpack that one, but I would say, well, it depends, especially because of toxins. And so it depends, but it also depends how your body's able to use it, right? So if you call kale and wild salmon or beets a healthy food, it's kind of like turning in a test to your teacher and being like, okay, great, I got an A, right? And the teacher's like, well, let me go read it. And they read the paper and they're like, oh, actually, you got a D and I'd like you to rewrite a couple of these. So one of the key pieces about weight health today is that we have to stop giving credit for what it is, whether a food is healthy or not. We need to recognize the body gives you credit once it gets where it's supposed to go. So micronutrient testing is not going to tell me, it could tell me across the board that you're just not absorbing things, right? Or that maybe your body isn't breaking it down. So the mistake in my mind would be to then use a micronutrient testing, come over and then just supplement or just look to, tied to food and supplement to increase it instead of looking under the hood and saying, why is that happening?
Yeah. Well, in general, I think so many individuals' guts are dysbiotic and leaky gut.
Right.
So is that kind of like, obviously you want to be improving your food and the quality of your food, but is that obviously a big pillar of all this?
Huge. So in the book, I use an analogy of a pizza because number one, in the beginning, tell a story about my client, Mr. Pizza Pop. But then the other part is I thought that it's an analogy that's going to land across the world. Like kind of everybody knows what pizza is. So the crust of your pizza is actually digestion. And I incorporate hydration into that. So anything that is going to have to do with how we move, break down, absorb, and eliminate nutrients or the food that becomes the nutrients, that's your absolute foundation. If that isn't optimized, the sauce that you put on top of it, which are the better nutrition principles, doesn't matter how delicious it is, doesn't matter if it's quote unquote perfect. If your crust isn't better, the pizza isn't going to come together. The cheese are your lifestyle choices, and then the toppings are everything. They're all the things you have in this home, like all the different treatments and the choices that you make, supplements, medications. They're going to be, and sometimes the topping can absolutely make a pizza, but you can't have a poor crust and have a topping and then not have it come together. So I would say that the foundation there is digestion, and that is where I lean into with the assessment. The second part of that is that when you understand that our weight health hormones, so GLP-1, GIP, PYY, CCK, we're hearing about amylin now. I think we'll hear about oxymodulin in the future. When we're hearing about those hormones, they're made and deployed from the digestive tract, from the lining of the digestive tract. They go to receptor sites throughout the body. So if digestion is suboptimal in any capacity, that means that those are going to be suboptimal. And that's where we see 9 in 10 Americans at least having suboptimal weight health hormone function.
Interesting. So how do you, number one, assess?
Yeah.
And then how, I would love to hear some tips on how people can improve.
Yeah, absolutely. So around about 2004, when I saw my first bariatric patient, prior to that, I felt like I was just improving everybody's health by optimizing their digestion. So I was the digestion dietitian. I wrote the books on it. I trained the practitioners on it, super excited to do things like help bring bifidobacteria to, we didn't have bifidobacteria as a supplement before that. So, really exciting. But then in 2004, I saw a patient who had a bariatric surgery, and I learned from the doctor that the reason that their diabetes and their appetite and hunger changed so dramatically after surgery was something called incretin hormones. Our incretin hormones are GLP-1 and GIP. So that started me on a path, and I was like, wait a second, if I optimize gut lining, you mentioned leaky gut, literally the lining is where the L cells and the K cells are for those hormones. So in optimizing that with things like Akkermansia, Clostridium bifidobacteria, the polyphenols, the fibers, glutamine as what I think is an essential, not even a conditionally essential amino acid. When we do that, we then optimize the weight health hormone function. So So as I started doing that, and then as I started seeing patients who were on GLP-1 agonists as early as 2000, I think 2006, 2007 was the first patient that I saw. It might have been 2010, so I've kind of gone back to my data, but for using that for diabetes, we had liraglutide, and then since I've seen patients using those medications, what I realized is if anyone has any benefit from those medications, they've proven my thesis that underneath their own hormones weren't functioning properly, right? So when I looked at that, I was like you, I was a biohacker for weight health hormones. I'm like, okay, how do we make this work? How do we look at this? And what I realized was even if I was able to test your levels of GLP-1, and maybe that's what's coming down the pike, maybe we'll have a continuous GLP-1 monitoring, like a CGM. It doesn't tell me how the whole system is working. So I need to know digestion. I need to know about breathing and heart rate variability because, and really vagus nerve function, because your hormones travel, you get signals to activate them, and they also then travel via the vagus nerve as well as the bloodstream. So I had to look at that. There are some labs. I wanted to know about inflammation. I wanted to understand like sort of all metabolic processes. And then I also wanted to understand your lived experience with food. So for me as a child, I never felt full. When somebody said to me, stop eating when you're feeling full, I was like, cool, I'll eat the whole pizza because I just didn't feel full on that part, right? So when those hormones aren't working well, you realize you have these certain experiences. So when I put all of this together, this is how I've been practicing for 20 years and helping people on that part. It wasn't until the GLP-1 agonist became so popular that I realized we needed that assessment. So I created that assessment. That's how I ended up writing this book because the assessment is in there. I also made it free online. It is a clinical tool. So I always let people know if you're going to look at this, and do it, it is some work. You have to do a bit of biohacking or assessing yourself, on that part. And then you want to look at that. And then it tells us where we need to optimize. So if digestive function or if inflammation or, these sorts of things. So then when we have that assessment, we can dive in and say, it maps you to optimal or suboptimal function. And then under suboptimal, is it suppressed, meaning that yours actually work, but your choices are suppressing it? Or are they delayed, or are they frankly dysfunctional? And based on that, you have a protocol that I've outlined.
Interesting. If someone is, I'm assuming a lot of people are dysfunctional just based on the data that we know of,
100%. Yeah.
where weight is at right now.
Right.
Why or is it dysfunctional?
Yeah.
I'm sure.
I would say there's one thing that I'm curious about. I'm always cautious to say, to lean into thinking that the human body is perfectly designed. There's a however comma. The however comma is, I think in this case, when it comes to weight health, we were perfectly designed for the pre-industrial time. So our own weight health hormones stay on for about 2 to 5 minutes. So they are designed like a motion detector. That worked beautifully when we were like out in the fields, building homes, when we didn't have food available all the time, when we didn't even get like emails or letters. It was like our messaging, our brains, and in particular, our vagus nerve didn't have a lot of messages to check in on or a lot of signaling going on. Fast forward, we are overwhelmed, right? I like to say that today there's a literal stampede going in front of our motion detector all the time. So in 2 to 5 minutes, our body is meant to, have gotten the signals released from these hormones from the cell, and they're supposed to go to all these different receptor sites that we now know we have. We really know that thanks to the medications. So they need to go to the pancreas, they need to go to the brain, they need to go to the endothelial tissue, the blood vessels, they need to go heart muscle, they need to go to the thyroid, the liver. Like that's a lot of work to do in 2 to 5 minutes, right?
So from the time that you eat the piece of food or from the time that your body
From the time that your body releases it. And what's interesting is it's actually even often before we eat the piece of food, or because when you're getting signaling, your eyes might start to, if your mouth waters, if you are smelling something, so it could start sending the signals. If you're hungry, it's going to start to send those signals. So, but the 2 to 5 minutes I'm speaking about is from when they're released from the cell on that part. So if we have 2 to 5 minutes for them to get there, it's really crowded highways, there's traffic, there's breakdowns, So it may be that we need something that can stay on a little bit longer these days. And we'll get into that in a second. When we look at the medications today that we have, the first one stayed on for 24 hours. So just look at that. Instead of 2 to 5 minutes, the original GLP-1 agonist stayed on for 24 hours. Now they stay on for 24 hours, 7 days a week, right? Even at a low dose, even at a microdose, it's activating, on that
And
part.
essentially the signal is to stop eating. Is that the signal?
Well, what's interesting is it's a hormone that's going to all these different receptor sites. So in the pancreas, it's the signal for insulin to go to work and for glucagon to work differently. In the brain, when they hit the receptor sites, it's for leptin and ghrelin to work. So that's your hunger so it stops your hunger and it stimulates your satiety, your leptin, saying that you're feeling full. In your heart muscle and in the endothelial, it's doing different messaging, right? So it's doing different messages in these places. So the job of the hormone is to tell these other hormones or neurotransmitters to go to work. And so when it does that and it stays in that spot and it's hitting that receptor site, one of the reasons we're seeing so much benefit from this ingredient, from this medication, which is really a weight health hormone replacement therapy, right? Well, we're seeing all of this benefit is because it's activating all of these receptors. However, it's keeping it turned on for a really long time. So the pros and considerations of the medication are that on the one hand, when they keep you metabolically activated, you're not in rest and digest.
Yeah.
When they keep your stomach in delayed gastric emptying, then they're altering how your gut is functioning and potentially increasing risk for gut, dysbiosis or exacerbating underlying, gut dysbiosis. And so when we look at that, the other thing that they're doing is when the receptor sites are all satisfied, we're not stimulating your own hormones.
Right.
So then the vagus nerve is like, okay, I send these signals down to the cells. The cells are like, I could deploy this, but the receptor sites are already satisfied. So there's, I think, some confusion, and some of that piece. So it's a really interesting experiment that we have. It's been going on for a long period of time. And so my work in that is to take somebody who is on an agonist who decides to use this and optimize their weight health hormones, because I've already proven out that if you need one, to your point, if it's dysfunctional, we absolutely need to come in and be able to optimize in there while you're on it, even if you stay on it or if you want to come off of it. But for many people where there's dysfunction, they actually don't need the weight health hormone replacement, or they might use it at a lower dose, or they might cycle it, maybe use the peptide once a quarter, that kind of thing. And we still need to be optimizing that function. So the dysfunction, I think, when you look at why do we have so much dysfunctional weight health hormones, is because there's just the overwhelming amount of messaging. Then there's all the disruption to our vagus nerve, the disruption to our digestion. When we don't have the right protein intake or our digestion can't break it down and bring it there, we have all sorts of issues with the actual hormones being able to be made because they're peptide hormones. So there's a variety of different reasons that we find ourselves in such an extensive amount of dysfunction.
Interesting. I'm going to ask a lot of questions about GLPs.
Yeah.
I find it interesting. By the way, I tried, I actually interviewed Dr. Tina.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she got me excited about microdosing, a GLP-1. I tried 5 units for 2 weeks. And to me, I'm already lean enough. It was like suppressing my appetite had been too much. I wasn't hungry at all. Yeah. And also for me, I tracked my resting heart rate so tightly. I saw an increase.
Did you see? Yes. Yeah. And your heart rate variability, did you see it come down?
Yeah. So for me, I just did it for the 2 weeks as like a little trial and then just stopped it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm so fascinated by the potential benefits, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's probably not a person that I have in the show or a conversation as I have that doesn't bring up GLP-1s.
Yeah.
And I mean, my initial, and I'm certainly not an expert and haven't done very much, deep dive, but is the benefit primarily because they're losing weight, or are we seeing now like benefits separate? Because obviously it makes so much sense. If you reduce your size and your weight and you get to a healthy weight, your brain health will improve, your heart health will improve. But is it like extra benefits or is it really just the weight loss?
I love that. And it was a long time before, but I had completed my first endurance event, turned 50, had a lot of personal issues, and ultimately would find out that my uterus was about 5 times the size it should be from a fibroid, but I didn't know any of that. I had burst my fibroid on the mountain, and I was 20 pounds heavier on my belly, and I was literally like, I don't know what to do. And one of our colleagues had said to me, and so I used it, I would say I used a low dose, because the issue for me, I wasn't even looking at the heart rate variability. It was that I got so constipated so quickly. And if anything impairs my digestion because of my childhood, I'm like, absolutely not. So I tried to work through that and I found it workable, but I had to keep it at that low dose. I would say it was extremely helpful for me in that time period to resolve what really felt like a metabolic crisis. And it was the start, it's 40, I guess it was 50, almost 50, 49, 50. and also my hormone changes. And so, I think for me, it hasn't, since I've had my hysterectomy and kind of like optimized my hormones, I haven't felt that I need to use it, but I do sometimes use Americate, which is a hops from New Zealand, and it also it activates my own hormones at a higher level. One of the interesting things for me was I had developed such a strong hunger. Like I had never been hungry like that before. And so the fact that it was working on my leptin and ghrelin was really interesting. And I know from my genetics, like I have the genes to be absolutely obese and just to eat, but I was able to flip that messaging and realize I have survivor genes. So that really means that my body's going to hold on to everything, and my body really wants me to work out very hard. So I've leaned into that, but so we can see that. And I think to your question, the question is one that a lot of people are asking, and it really goes back to this whole messaging of weight health and a society that has said, like, if your weight is larger, all of these things are going to be an issue. And that's not actually the operating system's truth in that part. There is absolutely, if we have excess fat mass, so we'll start there. And there's a difference, obviously, between subcutaneous and visceral fat. So if we have visceral fat, that is the body telling us that I am putting fat where it doesn't belong. That's a dysfunction we have to unpack regardless. Like I've had people your size who have visceral fat issues that we have to work on, right? So I have to come in and say, what's not working in your body and unpack that. And certainly with any excess fat, we know that fat isn't just, this cell that is sitting there hanging out. It's metabolically active. It's trapping toxins. It's sort of pulling like a Klingon, if you go back to like the Star Trek days, and like really making our cells and things not work optimally. So we need to understand its impact. In the same way, we have to understand insufficient or problems with making muscle or bone, or even insufficient amounts of water in the body. So we really want to look at weight composition. So I bring that up because I think a lot of people are attributing the success of the medications, and the medication, especially all the research on it, we're all looking for how can you lose weight, what medication helps people lose more weight and lose weight faster. And that's actually really dangerous for the body and not better. So what I would say is it's actually going in, and we have the evidence, and this is where Dr. Tina was like way ahead of her time and so brilliant. We have the evidence that it's going and satisfying all of these receptor sites. So it's really helping the whole weight health ecosystem work better in that space. So if somebody uses it just to lose weight, there's very much the potential that they actually have gotten unhealthy in doing that. Imagine liberating toxins that you're not detoxifying, and then delayed digestion or impaired elimination, and you're not, getting rid of them. Imagine that you're losing muscle and losing, fat on that part. So there are a lot of pieces of the weight loss on this medication where it's not better. Where I like to use it, and I think it can be a great tool, is if we're doing the whole pizza, right, we got on that part, and we add this as the topping. For some people, especially those, I would say like myself, or those even that never actually had an external weight problem, but actually really were disordered eating and even eating disordered, where they didn't accumulate the fat mass, but they have been so restrictive on their consumption and haven't built a healthier body around that part. All of our just diet messages and all the stuff in the brain, I think getting rid of losing that can often be what somebody needs to do to then be on a path to enable, how do I choose the right nutrition for my body? How do I invest in my digestive health? How do I get more active? How do I learn to reduce my exposures to toxins and things like that?
Yeah. Is the majority of people's plans to be on this forever?
It's a great question. So I think people are confused with their plans. I'll give 3 examples. One of them belies a tremendous cynicism about pharmaceutical companies and intentions. I think pharma wants people, their businesses, they want to sell this. They want people on as high of a dose and on it as long as possible, really until their patent comes out. And then the next thing that they have patented, so there's a business model to this, right? Okay, I don't think everybody's evil and, cynical on that part, on that piece. But the research done on it has really followed this model of like how quickly and how much weight can I get somebody to lose, which is not a health outcomes. It's not a weight health approach. So if you go on one of these medications and you see it and it's served up to you as a solution, which is the same way a lot of physicians who are prescribing it are presenting it, they're saying like, for the first time ever, I've had all these patients who haven't been able to succeed at losing weight, which is what they've had it for their goal for their patient, and maybe the patient has had. And now that's working with these medications. So I'm just going to script to the medication, and I might say to them, have more protein, or you should strength train, or we should increase your fiber. But if you're looking at it and serving it up as the solution, you're going to have to stay on it, because if you don't fix what's underneath, you can't, then you're going to have to stay on it forever. I want to also note that is the same for any medication. If you go on a statin and you don't fix any of the underlying issues, number one, you're not heart healthy, like you don't become heart healthy by being on a statin. But number two, you haven't optimized all of what was going on that was causing this dysregulation or cardiometabolic issues. Same thing if you use an SSRI for depression. Same thing if you, we could go on about any medication, right? So the second part of it is, if you are on it and you do the work underlying, there's a question. I don't have a crystal ball about anyone's life. I could use my own life as an example. Would I maybe use this, like, let's say that I haven't gone into menopause yet, but let's say when I go through menopause, I have, difficulty balancing my hormones for 2 or 3 years. If that turned out, and what I saw originally was, for the first time in my life, I had elevated LDL, I had ApoB, I had thyroid antibody, it was just this, things were falling apart. If I could use a tool like this to help me get through that time period, then maybe I would use it again, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't want to crystal ball with any of my patients and say, if you go on this now, we'll do this for 6 months and you'll never need it again. I think it's a tool we can come in and out of using. However, we absolutely need to understand that if you come off of this medication, while you're on it, you're suppressing your own hormones and the whole system. And then additionally, if you aren't fixing it, like, we have to fix that underneath. So the way in which you come off of it is going to be really important. And I tackle that in my book because I feel like, for me, it's a weaning approach. It is an optimization. So I had somebody come to me, I share her story in the book. She had lost 60 pounds on an agonist, and she's like, I'm ready to come off of it. My doctor and I are like, I'm at my BMI. I'm good to go. I did my weight health hormone assessment. I go, you are not good to go. You've lost muscle. You've lost bone. Your nutrition, you're backloading. You're like not eating all day. You're eating at night. You're relying on caffeine because your heart rate variability, you're fatigued, and all these other things. So we had to fix that stuff before I started her weaning. And then with the weaning, I have very strict protocols. If somebody gains 5 pounds of fat mass and we see that in a time period, then we're going to stop and look at what's going on, because I can't stand these like stories of like people who, we hear the data says like after a year, people come back and they've gained all of their weight and it's fat mass. Who's helping these patients? Like usually, it shouldn't be that space. So I think the other part of that is, I believe that the protocols for this and the care with this medication really belong with qualified nutrition professionals, which most of the time aren't our physicians.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I feel like it's so rare for people to have any access to like an RG or at least, I mean, I'm sure you would probably agree. A lot of do you feel like the training that you had in school is the way that you practice?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
In fact, like if we had known each other, then we would have had a lot of laughs. Every 6 months I was in somebody else's office being like, I'm quitting. Like, I hate this. Cause I'd gone through my own personal journey. I'm repairing my digestion. I'm in at events with like Andy Weil and the Dr. Lodog. And, this was before like that functional medicine. It was really like on the integrative side. And I'm doing all this, or before my exposure. And I'm in class, and it's like, give the same sheet of paper to somebody with IBS with constipation versus, IBS with diarrhea, or like every woman of this size needs a 2,000 calories. So not all dietitians are trained that way. I will say today, many, many more. And you don't have to be a dietitian. You can be a qualified nutritionist. I would, investigate someone's training regardless of who you're working with. I did lean into this when I was writing the book, because every time I'm out there speaking, somebody's then like, well, can I work with you? And, I was seeing patients, and I do see patients, but this, I can't see everyone in this country at this point. So one of the things I did with the book is there's a QR code in there. And instead of just offering bonuses, I offer access to the nutritionists and coaches that I've trained. And so you can go through and for free, like literally if somebody's getting the book at the library and they, you're borrowing it from a friend and you scan that, you can come into a HIPAA compliant platform and you can ask questions. At some point, there may need to be an investment where you're like, okay, I'd like to work with you, or I'd like to do that. I need help with this. But it is important. Like, this is my way, I think, right around the time I met you, I was still in DC because that's when I had seen, I was coming up to the Cleveland Clinic and some work with Mark Hyman. I think that's how we originally connected. And I was in DC and I'm like, we're going to change everything here. And we just didn't, and I don't have confidence that I think there are a lot of great things that could happen right now in DC, whatever. I just don't think our government's going to solve this. So I think we need access to practitioners and coaches. So I pivoted and created that company.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I have a lot of concerns about how people are getting put on them, the way that, I mean, because it could feel all things are going really well.
Yeah.
And this like crashing point where when people come off of them, their muscle is just reduced, and it's obviously harder to put back on that muscle than it is the fat. So hopefully everybody listening to this is like being very well educated.
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to.
Right.
Everybody not everybody, but sometimes there's confusion because, I really want to have a low tox house.
Yes.
Of that nature.
Yeah.
But I'm in zero way opposed to, pharmaceutical interventions where we need them. But
use
I think
properly, right? And use
properly.
in collaboration with all of that. I think that's so key because we are where it's so many of the great, everybody's like, oh, the GLP-1 agonist should get a Nobel Prize. And I was like, they should, for teaching us how our body works. I have been, trying with whatever little now or larger platform I had, for a couple of decades to talk to people about why it's so important to understand these weight health hormones. Now, because there's a GLP-1 agonist, every day there's a new study that comes out, and says, look at what an agonist can do, look at what this, can do. But we're also seeing, look at, these foods are nature's Ozempic, or these supplements are nature, and it's so bad in that space. So I think it's about education, yes, but I'll take us back to the start of our conversation. And really the work that you're doing is to help people be able to actually get insights about their body. So, when I saw a bariatric patient, before the patient could have surgery, they came to see me and we did all of this work. And sometimes I'm better not perfect from a societal standpoint. Sometimes that was 4 weeks before surgery. But in the ideal world, it was 3 months before surgery. And there were things that we could do to tee them up to be successful here. If you're considering a journey with an agonist for the reasons that we're talking about, in the ideal world, let's do some of this assessment and have you have the best on-ramping, with it.
Yeah.
If you're already on it, I think there's great opportunity, and I wrote the book with that in mind, for anyone who's using it as a tool or not using it as a tool to do this work in tandem and just recognize that, a lot of the messaging that's out there, because this drug is so popular right now, is actually giving you one size fits no one recommendations that aren't going to be, better for your longevity.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember when, I was running Live when these exploded, and then all of a sudden I couldn't get them, and it was crazy. And now just and I mean, something had to happen.
Yes.
Because our trajectory is not accessible.
Abysmal.
But I just really pray that people are getting good advice at the same time.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm working with individuals who, when you look at the spectrum, I'm working with one would call them children. I would say my youngest patient who has used one of these was 13, 14. I've got kids who are 18, 19. And remember, I'm not the physician, so I'm not prescribing it. I thankfully work with physicians in this space who lean into my knowledge and understand, that piece of it. But as somebody who also understands the implication of body dysfunction that can occur at such a tremendous and rapid pace when a growing body is either suppressed or when it's so dysfunctional, the diabetes and fatty liver and other things that we see in teenagers today are so bad. So I'm kind of curious. I'm very Pollyanna about this. I believe this is a tool where we could create generational weight health, where to course correct, we might need a lot more of this medication right now, but then future generations we don't, right? That would be, to me, the way that it would play out in a more meaningful way.
I hope so. I mean, yeah, it's heartbreaking. I can be sometimes very insulated because all my friends are super healthy and really no one is overweight. So but when I look at the stats, it's just so sad. And this really just, in my opinion, shouldn't be happening to kids. And it's so sad that it is.
It's so sad. It's so multifactorial. And I also will acknowledge a lot of people have said to me, because remember, I practiced in Los Angeles for 15 years. They're similar to you, they'll say oh, all my friends are healthy. And what they actually were saying was, I don't think this is where you were going. You actually know your friends are healthy because you all are assessing your health on that part. But I just want to dimensionalize that because a lot of people have said, oh, well, everybody's thin. And there's this assumption that then you're healthy. And because I practiced in Los Angeles for so long, and especially so significantly in the entertainment industry, I knew that everyone is battling a health issue. I mean, they were coming to me and they're saying like, okay, I've been trying to keep my weight a certain way. And I'm like, yeah, look what's going on under the hood, in that part. So I think that and Tina Moore's work is Dr. Tina, her work is so valuable in understanding a true microdose, even though now we were texting, I think at one point early on to the microdosing conversation and she just frankly said to me, she's like, we've lost like on the marketing side because now, everyone's marketing a low dose as a microdose. I think that it feels with all the weight bias, I think it feels somehow like more like cool, hip, whatever to say like I microdose rather than I take a low dose. You know what I mean? But she talks about a true microscopic dose can be used like a peptide, as in peptide therapy can really be used, but it's not going to have weight health implications. It might have the health side of things. It's not going to work on the weight.
What are you guys talking about as a microdose these days?
Yeah, and I would lean into probably her information more on that just because I'm also not a prescriber, but I've been on, now that I'm going around the world and talking about this and working with different practice groups. As an example, I was sharing with you, my nephew's type 1 diabetic, and there are a couple of practitioners who are using a microdose to help type 1 diabetics, and they're using it very, very tightly regulated because, if you mess with insulin in a type 1 diabetic, but to be able to use this to stimulate and maybe use less insulin. And I have a colleague who's a naturopath, and she's been using it this way as she went through perimenopause and menopause. And it's been a game changer for her because we don't like to just give more synthetic insulin, right? Like more of that hormone replacement. So where I've always stood with a microdose and looking at peptides is more of like a biodynamic understanding or, homeopathic, where a very small amount of something. So I lean into micro. So like the term micro would be less than 1, on that part and looking at the microscopic. But, I think that's different. The other part that will be important for your listeners to note is the newer medications that are coming out. These are so hard to pronounce. So retatrutide is still a biosimilar hormone replacement therapy. So it's still our own hormones, that dissimilarity being that extended amount of time, and it's a triple agonist. But orforglipron, which is coming out, is a small molecule non-peptide. So as soon as you get into that place, now we're on medications that are not biosimilar. They are working on the receptor site, and because they're not a peptide, we may see better absorption, and they aren't as having as much of the digestive issues. So there's a reason that, they like that, but that's a medication and it's actually skipping over the first pocket in a receptor. So those are not going to work the way that our own work. And that actually gives me more pause on what does that mean for the whole body's ecosystem.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great point. So if you're on a GLP-1 and then you come off, you can like re-stimulate your own.
You absolutely can. And usually during, so what I'll do is the work I'll do while somebody is on it is, working on digestive optimization, hydration, working on better nutrition, working on lifestyle, so kind of looking at all of that, optimizing, doing all the things that you would be doing on a daily basis, right? It's like, where can we reduce toxins? How can we improve sleep? Like one of my favorite pieces of this is, if the whole ecosystem disruption has really been negatively impacting your sleep and your recovery, how can we, optimize that? And then as we start to get to a place where we want to experiment, I usually wean by extending your same dose. Maybe we'll come down a little bit, but your same dose just out a longer period of time. And what that means is you're going to start to experience maybe have a little bit of cravings that come back. Maybe there's some food noise. Maybe, we start to see, hopefully we start to see heart rate variability and some of the other stuff start to upregulate on that piece. And in that time period, I'll lean into things like Americete, which is the brand name is CaloCurb, and that one will help us to elevate your own. It gives you about a 4-hour window. So if I use that twice in the day, it gives you an 8-hour window, but it doesn't interfere with sleep. It doesn't interfere with digestion. There are a couple of others. There's a combination of a potato starch and I believe it in beet that's also being looked at. I'm curious about their human clinicals. And then there's also an interesting yeast that is being manipulated, kind of like a genetically modified, like it's a bio like a biopharma, approach on that part, where they're creating they've said that they've created a peptide that mimics our own, but it's from, yeast instead of. So there are these options that may become tools to help us to use in that time period, but I would work on extending it for a longer and longer time period while tracking all of those other markers. And then one of the key things to look at is, in any of that time period, do you notice a place where what you were doing to keep you to sort of optimize yourself while on the medication, you're not able to consistently do? And that's going to be where we work on, right? Like that's going to be the place before we would wean for a longer period of time.
Got it. Well, that was actually my next question, because so many of these companies reach out to me that say they're like a GLP-1
Right.
supplement or whatever.
Yeah.
And I mean, at this point, I'm just like not doing the
Yeah.
brand deals. I mean, I've done so few anyways in
Yeah.
my life. So do they work?
Yeah. So, okay. So in the book, I break up, and this was my work for, pretty much since about 2003 when I created the Ashley Koff Approved. It was like a stamp. It was a nonprofit project. And I went in and evaluated supplements. And one of the things that I was looking at, and people thought I was like really unique in this space, but because I started my career off in advertising, we've often talked about like marketing and advertising. I was like, I'm going to evaluate your marketing message. And if your marketing message is BS or harmful, like you're on my not list, on that part. And so I sort of resurfaced that for this, and I put together 3 different columns. The easy column to understand is the one on the far left, which is weight health hormone replacement therapy. Those are your medications. There is no supplement that is nature's Ozempic. I don't think there ever will be. There's nothing that is going to have you activated and go just directly to the receptor sites and stay on for 24 hours for 7 days a week. So take that off the plate. If anyone is saying that they rival an agonist, it's not happening. Our own hormones break down within 2 to 5 minutes. What we can do is we can increase the amount of our own hormones. And in some instances, it looks like we may be able to extend, instead of that 2 to 5 minute window, maybe we can at least get to 5 minutes. Maybe we can get to 10 minutes, or a little bit longer. So when we look at that, we have weight health hormone optimizers, and those are things that directly impact the production and the, we'll call it the function of those hormones. So that might be something like glutamine. That might be something like acromantia, absolutely, because it chews up the mucin. So acromantia mucinophilia, it's going to chew up the mucin, and that in that turnover, it's going to stimulate and help protect the cells where these are secreted. Acromantia feeds off of polyphenols like green tea and chocolate, and some of these others, pomegranate. So when we look at that, that's where like something like urolithin A or pomegranate might be, really impactful. So when we look at all of those, that's definitely going to be a space where I think we can talk about those as weight health hormone optimizers, or because the term GLP-1 is out there, I call them GLP-1 optimizers. Everything else belongs in a column of weight health optimization. And that's where you and I stand, which is everything belongs there. Like anything, if I can't get enough vitamin D from my food, I'm going to get vitamin D from my supplement. If I can't get in enough, like I'm really bad about getting in orange foods. I don't know what my damage is on that part. I try, like Deanna Minnick, I'm always like, all right, Deanna, like just keep reminding me, good for my hormones. Good. She always teases me. She's like, put orange pillows in your house, like anything that like gets you to love this color, right? So when I don't eat that, I lean into supplements that have some of the compounds. They don't work the same as food, but they help to, me to optimize levels. So we can do those optimization, but those should not be called, they shouldn't be called specific to the weight health hormone on that part. And then there are foods, things like anything that triggers the bitter taste receptors, that some of those actually go in and trigger the taste receptors in the gut. Many of them still stay on the tongue, but we have GLP-1 receptors on our tongue, so it can be favorable there. So, and then the final one that I think is interesting, and why I think most supplements don't actually help us, and that is really that things have to be delicious to us. So one of the things I love about you with your food is, number one, we eat with our eyes, so things look beautiful to you, but also you will lean it. I've known this about you from day one. You're like, I'm not touching it if it's not delicious, right? Like I remember like being like, the sushi, yes, it has to be like totally clean and all of this, but it needs to be delicious.
Yeah.
And deliciousness actually registers our satiety response. And so one of the easiest things we can all do, and it's like at the front of the book, is I created a test that's better be delicious to me. And it helps you just stop after you're eating a bite and rank the deliciousness on a scale of 1 to 10. And when you rank it on a scale of 1 to 10, if it's not a 7 or greater, you really need to ask yourself, should I be having this right now?
Yeah. Question about that though. So I would say my scale of deliciousness
Yeah.
is like very different from most people's
Yes.
because I think, people ask me this all the time, like, do you cheat? Do you
Yeah.
have cheat foods? To me, blueberries it's not a cheat food, but
Right.
it tastes so amazing.
Yeah.
I eat the 100% dark chocolate.
Right. Same.
Just the
Because I love the
cacao
super
because
bitter.
it
Yeah.
tastes amazing to me. Cherries, something like that. So how long does it take for people's taste buds to turn over so that if they stop eating like these highly palatable processed foods, how long
Yeah.
will it take to actually think blueberries taste amazing?
Yeah. So we have to look at that. We have to meet someone where they are right now, so I can't give a recommendation. And there are some people, no matter how good the blueberry is, it's never going to taste delicious to them, right? They're like, I don't like blueberries, on that part. And I would still say maybe lean into like having the blueberries as part of something that we can find a way on that piece.
Yeah.
So one of the things you actually are bringing up, and I know you've looked at this because I remember one of your podcasts, I'm going to forget her name, but our oral microbiome is so important. And for me, actually, when I did Invisalign, I did it kicking and screaming. And I finally got to a place where my teeth were, this is interesting. I have such a small mouth, I found out. I was like, never been told that. But my teeth were like turned, and so it was really affecting my health to have my teeth. So I was concerned about having plastic in that whole time and also concerned about the amount of time I was wearing it. I was like, this is not good. So I got really into how do you optimize your oral microbiome then? And then when I came off of it, I was like neurotically. I was like, that has to be optimized. So one of the things I think we have to lean into is more of that, and looking at that. And one of the side effects of being on an agonist is many people actually will get a little bit more reflux, which can alter oral microbiome. And when you get more dry mouth, if you're dehydrated, et cetera, that can also be negatively impacting that. So sidebar on that, I think that's really important. The second part of the taste bud piece is what's interesting. I just did this test. You're going to be like aghast. I had a client who came in. I was proving a point to her. She's on an agonist, and she kind of sent me this note. And when I say came in, we did this virtually, but she was kind of laughing and also knew she was calling herself out. She's like, well, I didn't really eat anything. She's like, I had coffee most of the day. She's like, and then the kids' Halloween candy. It's always blame the kids. The Halloween candy was around. And so she's like, I had 2 Reese's cups. And I was like, okay. And she's like, but they were delicious. And I stopped her and I said, were they really? And I was like, I'd like to understand this. Said, so can we go back? Can you actually tomorrow just eat 2 Reese's cups? And she's like, what? And I said, and I want you after each bite to stop on a scale of 1 to 10 and measure. She got 4 bites in and it was no longer a 7. So what's interesting about these hyper palatable foods, as you said, is they're designed to be delicious from the first bite, absolutely. But they're then designed to override our satiety mechanism so that we don't actually feel full. So we keep eating them. We're not continuing to eat them because they're delicious. Like if I, like one of my horrific, like it's not even a cheat, like I have no guilt around food, but you would again be aghast. If the candy is laid out in front of me, or if I'm on a road trip because I cross the country, and I was like, I love Good and Plenty's. They're disgusting. They have fake colors. They're made with wheat. They're like, but the black, licorice flavor.
I don't know what a good.
Oh my God, they're so I'll show you, and you'll be aghast. So I'm like tasting them, and I was like, you know what? After like 5, they're gross. Like they're not even delicious, on that part. But having the taste let me lean into it. So we do need to work on revising our taste buds. I have in here something called the sweet taste bud test, where if you bite into an apple on a scale of 1 to 10, if it's not a 7, you'll notice a theme here. On a scale of 1 to 10,
Yeah.
If the apple isn't sweet enough, your sweet taste buds need a reset, right? And it may not be reset to 100% dark chocolate, but it might need to reset to 60 or 70%, something like that. And so what you can still use all of this to when you're maybe making choices that are what we might call suboptimal or certainly don't meet the qualitarian standard on that part. But for you, what you've identified is one of the ways you're nourishing and engaging your weight health hormones in the body is by leaning into what is delicious to you. And then it's the amount is really about, I don't need to keep eating because at a certain point, it's just not going to be delicious to me longer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I also try to eat foods that are so satiating that I am not going to overeat because like you're not going to necessarily overeat like wild salmon or
because your hormones are working right on that part. So that's where the tool for many people, they have not been either quiet the noise in their head and actually be present enough at their meal to understand that they are satiated. So that's a key one. So that's where I think the medication can help. And the second part is that satiation, they may not be feeling it side, and then the third part, you and I know, there's a very big difference between like, say, I love like Seatopia salmon or like the like I was lucky enough to in Bristol Bay in Alaska, like have salmon. My friend Rick Moonan's a chef. We caught the fish and he filleted it there and we ate it, in the row while we were sitting right there. Be able to have that's like amazing. And you have a handful of mouthfuls and you're like done. But, when you go to a restaurant and they're serving you a salmon that's as big as my forearm, people are eating through it because the flavors with it are not good or it's just, and you're continuing to eat because you're trying to get to some arbitrary fullness because the satiation isn't there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, I loved all this on GLP-1s. Okay, I want to ask you what I feel like is such a controversial question these days, but what about seed oils?
Yeah, great question. The problem that I have with seed oils is I think we attacked the wrong thing. I think that, so I'm such a marketer, right? Like, so I don't know if I had shared this at the beginning, but my first career was in advertising. I sold sugared cereals. Like I told people like, buy Raisin Bran Crunch. It will give you great morning energy, or buy Sugar Smacks. I'm sorry. I also sold diamonds and hair color and other things I'm not proud of. I think the marketing around seed oils is probably where I'm more concerned. There is no question that quality olive oil, and that this is also important to understand that, a lot of olive oil is, either knowingly or unknowingly compromised on that part. Things like avocado oil, like all of your fats from non-seed sources, that there are great choices that are there. But the real issue is what we've done to oils, and what we've done to some that are seeds and then some that aren't seeds. So, I guess like soybean, like I'm as, on that part. And I guess somebody said to me, well, it's a soybean seed. I'm like, all right. For the lay person or for the public, I don't think that's the right messaging. I think that understanding that vegetable oil, that was brilliantly named vegetable oil. I remember that studying that marketing campaign, just like the marketing campaign for enriched flour. Like these words were chosen very intentionally to get people to be excited about it. So I would rather say vegetable oil has no place. And we need to clean that up. I think that when we process oils, any oil improperly, or when we use it in the home or we don't store it properly, we run the risk of using something like olive oil stored improperly or at too high of a heat is not going to be good for us. And then the majority of the other seed oils that are out there, is it good for us to know that, people are consuming a lot of cottonseed oil? Yeah, it would be really good for them to know. That's not better for you, on that part. Is canola or some of these others, are they problematic? Yes. I don't think that that's necessarily the right angle, is to just have food. My problem is when a label says seed oil free on it, it doesn't tell me as much as when it shows off the ingredients of what is actually in there, the macros, the quality of the food. So I lean into like what is actually in there on that part.
Yeah.
And then I think we've done things like modified fats, as an example, like EPG, where I think they call it EPOG or something, where, they've modified a seed oil. And the same people who are saying like never touch a seed oil are eating bars that have a modified fat in it. And I'm just like, are you kidding? Like, and saying like, don't do all of those other things because it's bad for your heart health, but then get more protein from synthetic and a modified fat. And what's that doing for your heart health? So I'll come for anyone on these pieces. I think I think we really have to get better. The final piece that we have to recognize in all of this, and you do a great job on this, is the privilege of access. Like you and I have talked about, like how we grew up, like you've worked so hard to be able to afford your choices and that you're very intentional about where you spend your money. The majority of people are not there. Like we are in a financial crisis when it comes to food quality. So where I lean into is what are the better choices that you can make for yourself? And sometimes I am using a supplement to help somebody who has access only to something that's more poor quality so that I can maybe help their body detoxify better. Like maybe, I'm giving them a glucoraphanate, or something like that. I think we just have to be, I lean into, I name my company and my initials BNP, better not perfect. We just have to meet people where they are and try to optimize.
Yeah, I think that's a really important message. Just for a few practical takeaways for people, I mean, some of my go-tos might be like the Clean 15 and Dirty Dozen, right? Maybe that's a resource. Like, what are some of the best resources for people that, it is a struggle to be able to afford? Because eating healthy is incredibly expensive.
Yes. Yeah.
And especially if you're shopping at Erewhon and you
Yes.
just don't even
Yeah, yeah. I know. I left Erewhon and I was like, I mean, I appreciate it, but I was like, it was more expensive than like a very fancy dinner I had had the night before. I have to say I liked what I had at Erewhon better, so I just like kind of put it, in that camp. So there are 4 pillars of better nutrition. The definition I had to create for better nutrition is giving your body today, so it's personalized and time-stamped, what it needs to run better while reducing or avoiding what irritates, overwhelms, and disrupts its efforts. So when we look at that, there are 4 pillars. Quality is going to be one of them. Quantity is going to be one of them. Timing, so your caloric window and how frequently you consume within that. And then nutrient balance, and looking at that. So when we lean into quality, I think it's a mistake to make an assumption about organic, that just, choosing organic, I don't want that to be teed up, but there's a lot that go into our organic standards, that are really great. And what I would say with quality is if you're eating things on the Dirty Dozen and have the choice to make upgrades, great. But most people, like what I've had is somebody told me they don't eat X, Y, and Z because it's on the Dirty Dozen list. And I was like, wait a second, I'd so much rather you ate that than what you are eating, which has artificial colors and, whatever. So frozen and freezing your own is a great way. Usually that's less expensive. The other piece that we just have to be better about, and I recognize again the privilege of time and access, but we are paying people to make our food or make much of it. And that cost, if we buy the actual ingredients, and I'm like an IKEA person, I'm some assembly required. I'm not sitting at home sprouting my own and doing, all this other stuff, but I will buy the different ingredients and assemble it myself. That I think can save you money and also give you options for leftovers and, being, more creative. So I would say that I'm trying to lean into the ingredients, buying the ingredients and then, making them yourself. And the other part is the quantity conversation. When we consume less, we actually have more available so that the cost can break out, So if I'm choosing a portion size, and this is where I get the protein conversation has become a little bit problematic because I'll have people who feel like they want to have 8 ounces of meat at a sitting, and I'm a little worried about their digestion, or I have reason to be very worried about their digestion, but also the cost of an 8-ounce steak as opposed to maybe 2 servings of a 4-ounce, and then what else you have with the steak and how do you meet your amino, your protein and amino profile. So I think the combination of quality and quantity can really help us in that part. And then the only one that I'm more obsessed about from a quality standpoint is the quality of supplements. I'm a little bit more forgiving on the food side because of deliciousness, because of access, but the only reason to use a supplement is for optimization. And so if you're using it for that purpose, do not wash your floor with dirty shoes. Don't come in and say oh, I'm going to get this, I'm going to buy a cheaper supplement and the quality of the ingredient or the other ingredients in there don't match up. That's a problem for me on that part.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, well, I feel like, those are really practical takeaways. How much of pesticides can you get off if it's not organic? Is there pretty good ways to do that?
I think you can, and cooking preparation is really interesting. I mean, look, there's a study and you can defend any position that you want, the research study. So somebody would be like, oh my gosh, I don't want to boil, fruits and vegetables because you lose all these nutrients. I totally agree. And also boiling, you lose the taste. I don't love that. Yeah. But when you actually prepare things in a little bit of water and then you get rid of the water, can some of the things, or can you wash, and make sure that you're washing your fruits and vegetables? That part can be great on that piece. I think some of the cooking preparations can also help you, with a reduction there. And then the other piece is if you lean into the other work of optimizing digestion and detoxification, I don't want high exposures to toxins, but if I have some exposure and then I have lifestyle practices where I eliminate that, that's going to be really helpful. If I optimize my hydration as an example and I can eliminate successfully, that's going to be helpful too.
Yeah. Just a last note, when I was in the airport not that long ago, I kind of glanced at the Burger King menu.
Yeah.
And I mean, I feel like the prices are so much more also, because I haven't had fast food since I lived at home.
Right.
But
right.
It's not even that affordable, or am I wrong?
Yeah. Well, and because you were in the food business, right? And so we were looking at what is the cost. I think it's become more on par with the fast food, like the quality food that's fast and the less quality food that's fast, we have seen a little bit more of a price parity. I would say the one place that that probably isn't the same is when you're looking for seafood or you're looking for organic. Like I think you still see, a higher price point there. But yeah, it's no longer, I mean, everything is so expensive. It's really no longer. So a lot of my work when we were in Ohio, I was fortunate enough to be involved with a food pantry every weekend. And what I would do there is talk to people about, and I was just stuffing bags and like helping, and like no judgment. I literally wanted people to have access. But because of my job, people would sometimes engage me and ask me questions, and we would go through, and it was interesting to look at, like, actually with some of what, like, whenever we would get a bag of cashews, I am sure they were not raw, I am sure they were not organic, but I was able to teach people how to make cashew milk, right? And that was something because we weren't getting, say, organic milk, or their kid couldn't have, that, or the soy milk wasn't organic. So we would look at different ways, to try. So I think we still have to lean into if you need fast, what can you do to prepare at home that you have fast available more often? And then the final piece on that is I actually find that some of the better quality packaged foods are on parity with cost. And like as an example, I love, and I've worked with them since I think for 13 years. For just loving the product on that part. But Perfect bars, they're just easy. So if I have $5 or $6, and I think they used to be $3, that can be a great option for me, whereas somebody might be getting a single burger or a taco or something that, isn't better quality. So I think sometimes we have to look at the packaged option and say that might be a better choice.
Yeah, I eat a lot of sardines. I've been on the road a lot. I think they're incredibly easy, super fast. You might look weird. I literally went to a Tony Robbins event. I was in the entryway eating sardines. But I mean, I think it's $7 a container. Great superfood. Travel with them all the time. So
if one of my friends, I'm going to have her listen to the podcast if for no other reason. So Lauren Slayton, one of my dear friends and an amazing nutritionist at Food Trainers, she will never let me live down when we were on a train. I think either from New York to DC or Boston to DC, I opened up a can of sardines and she wanted to kill me. She was and she was laughing, but she was also maybe, Lauren, fair to say, impressed. I think we were actually coming from a dietitian conference from Boston. And I'm this is so convenient, and a lot of the different ones have different oils. I love how Jose Andres has one and he has tomato and a little pinch of sea salt and olive oil. And I'm like, this is amazing. So I love that. But yeah, boy, will people look at you. And I guess I have to be fair that they could be stinky on that part. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. So many people have been like, are you serious? That's what you
And you're like, yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, totally.
I'm okay with it.
And people get into the conversation then with me, well, what if the tin is lined with plastic? At the end of the day, I'm just trying to do my best. Better, not perfect on that part. And nutritionally, but I also think for the way that our palates have been curated, I'm not going to find something delicious that is sweeter or that it, or those kinds of things. And so the savoriness of that is also satisfying. So I love that. Oh, I didn't know we were sardine junkies on that part. Yes.
Yeah. As soon as I land at a hotel, I have my order that I put in.
Yes.
I find the nearest Whole Foods or health food store, and I get a whole bunch of sardines, blueberries, arugula, bunch of mineral water. He's in the room. I don't eat out really at all when I do all this traveling.
That's right.
I'll often just eat before. And then I have all my snacks. I get some macadamia nuts, raw. I have all this stuff, so I'm not tempted to have to, go out.
In the name of fast on that part, it's so funny. My favorite still just across the board as a go-to is arugula. I take the sardines and I dump the olive oil, and then I always travel with hemp seeds and I put hemp seeds on it. The one thing that it'll depend on for me is I wish I had a better, you might know, I wish I had a better travel option for spices, because I do find that the sardines give me usually I'll get a little bit of flavor in there. And then arugula obviously has flavor, but I love spices. And so I always don't want to buy a container of spices. Do you bring spices? Do you order spices?
I do sometimes bring a little. I just have, I think it's for products or something.
Yes.
So a little carry-on.
Yeah.
I definitely love to bring a little baby salt.
Okay.
So I have salt.
Yeah.
So that's an option.
Yes.
And then the other thing I've really been loving and I order is I'll order order like a little glass container of artichokes.
Okay.
And then so it's like this amazing salad. So it
Yes.
has like seeds, the sardines, the
Yes.
arugula, and it's like
Yes.
this
Yeah.
incredible salad.
Yeah.
I ate this every day when I was in Australia for like 12 to 13 days.
Yes.
It's just great. So,
I love that. And I know we both know Tim Spector, and I really love the Daily 30 also too. So I found that one, like, as a mix on that piece, I had traveled with that one. And then I sometimes also find that I do all of this and then I forget like the bowl, like the things that I have done. Like I've washed out like ice containers and been like, how do I make it, and do all of that. And again, I recognize privilege, but I will say, like, I'm on a budget. Like it is tough with all of this travel. And so one of the other pieces about that has been the ability to order it. I mean, I feel sad because in a lot of communities, I like to support the chefs and like go out and that piece. But the budget and eating on my timing, especially at 52, like I'm trying to eat dinner at 5:30, like that kind of thing. So I think it's great to be able to travel that way. Yeah.
I love that. No, I totally agree. And yeah, it just takes a little bit, extra work, but it could certainly, I have traveled so much lately. I've been to like 8 different countries, 6 months, and it's given me an opportunity to really flex that, like, okay, how do you make this feel healthy? And I would say it is what you're saying. I mean, it's not perfect, right? It's not, other than that, I make every single meal at home. It's incredible. But, it is what it is, and you can do the best that you can. So,
Yeah. Was there one country that you've traveled to of recent where you were more impressed than the U.S. in terms of what you were able to get, the ease of which or the price of which? I'm just curious.
Let me think. I mean, obviously, I have such a good system here, right? Like I have on Fridays, I get like biodynamic, local, all that delivered. Right. So great. But in general, like I also felt a bit of ease in other countries.
Yeah.
Like when I was in France or when I was in London or because their regulations are a bit tighter already. So actually, I thought London was really easy. The hotel, I mean, they did put me up in an incredibly nice hotel, but they had so many organic options in the hotel, which is pretty rare to find.
Yeah, London has been a huge, huge change since I remember traveling there. Well, one, like when I was in university, but then also probably like 90s, 2000. And you were kind of like, I'll go for fun food, but I would not be going for health fit. And then it's just a revolution there. So I love that. And then I would say the Scandinavian countries to me have just been, I mean, like Finland, I'm like always like, anyone want to invite me there? So just if you're listening, I think those are great ones to lean into. But it is impressive to see that in London.
Yeah. Sweden, I wasn't there for long. I was in Sweden this year though, too. So right. Well, Ashley, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Where can people find you? Where can they get the book?
Sure. Well, the book is hopefully everywhere. So maybe just tell me if you can't find it. But Your Best Shot is available anywhere where you want to buy books. And then we also make sure if you do buy it, you click on the QR code or you go to the Better Nutrition Program to get access to those resources. And then on social, you'll find me with my name. I'm sure you guys will link or the Better Nutrition Program.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I love it.
Of course.